My parents made me sleep in the basement to give my room to my cousin, so I moved out and told everyone what they really did. I'm a 19-year-old guy, and for as long as I can remember, I've been treated like the afterthought in my own family. I'm not saying I was abused in obvious, movie-like ways, but the quiet neglect, the favoritism toward other relatives, and the constant reminder that I was never the special one cut deeper than anyone realized. It was in the little things, my birthdays forgotten or celebrated with half-hearted cakes, while my cousins' parties looked like mini weddings. My clothes always bought from clearance racks, while everyone else got brand new seasonal wardrobes. Even as a kid, I noticed it. I'd sit at the dinner table and feel invisible, my words drowned out by louder voices my parents actually wanted to hear. Sometimes I wondered if I was born into the wrong family, like I was some stranger crashing at their house. Not their son. I remember once asking my mom, "Why don't you ever take pictures of me like you do of him?" She didn't even look up from her phone when she replied, "Because he actually smiles." That crushed me. I stopped asking questions after that. Still, I told myself things would get better when I got older. Maybe when I hit high school or when I started working, they'd respect me more. But it didn't happen. If anything, the gap between me and everyone else they cared about just got wider. The only place that felt truly mine was my bedroom. Small, kind of messy, with posters on the walls and stacks of notebooks I used to write down my thoughts. That space wasn't much, but it was the only thing I could call mine. The only place I could breathe without feeling like I had to compete. I had no idea that even that little sanctuary would be ripped away from me. It all started when my parents announced that my cousin, Daniel, was coming to stay with us. He was only a year older than me, and to hear them tell it, his parents were going through some tough times and needed help. My mom said it so sweetly, like we were doing this huge, noble act. At first, I didn't think much of it. I figured he'd crash on the couch or maybe take the guest bed for a little while. But then I noticed the tone change. They were excited. They cleaned the house from top to bottom, bought new sheets, and even stocked up on his favorite snacks. Snacks I didn't even know we could afford, because whenever I asked for anything extra, the answer was always, "Money's tight right now." When Daniel finally arrived, the difference was immediate. My dad clapped him on the back like he was some kind of hero. My mom hugged him so tightly you'd think she'd been waiting for this reunion her whole life. Me? I got a distracted "oh hey" before they whisked him inside to show him around. "Wow, this place is nice," Daniel said, looking around like he owned it. "Make yourself at home," my dad replied, grinning ear to ear. "Your family." I wanted to be happy for him. Really, I did. But the way they fussed over him lit something ugly in my chest. I tried to shake it off, told myself it was just the excitement of having someone new around. Still, I couldn't ignore the gnawing feeling in my stomach. It was like I was being pushed further and further into the background of my own home. I thought it would be temporary. A couple weeks, maybe a month. I had no idea they were preparing to take things even further. At my expense. About 2 weeks after Daniel moved in, my parents called me into the living room. They were sitting on the couch side by side, wearing these stiff smiles that instantly made me uneasy. Daniel was upstairs, blasting music in my old speakers, and I had this weird sinking feeling before they even opened their mouths. My mom started. "We've been thinking, Daniel's room is kind of cramped. It doesn't make sense for him to be stuck in there when you've got the bigger space." I froze. "What are you saying?" My dad leaned forward like he was breaking important news. "We're moving Daniel into your room. You'll be fine in the basement. It's only fair. You're younger and you're stronger. You can handle it." I laughed, this ugly, sharp sound I couldn't hold back. "So you're kicking me out of my own room? For him? Don't be dramatic," my mom snapped. "We all make sacrifices for family. Daniel needs the space more than you do. It's just a room, just a room." My chest felt like it was caving in. That was my sanctuary, my one corner of the world where I felt seen. And now they were handing it over to Daniel like it was some kind of gift basket. I tried to protest. "That's my room. I've lived there my whole life." "Enough," my dad cut me off, his voice hard. "Be grateful you even have a place to sleep. Some kids don't." The conversation ended there. No vote, no discussion, just a decision stamped and sealed without me. That night, I watched as Daniel carried his stuff upstairs, grinning like he'd just won a prize. He didn't even look guilty. And me? I walked down the creaky stairs into the cold, unfinished basement, staring at the concrete walls and wondering how my parents could so easily replace me. I didn't know it then, but that was only the beginning of how bad things would get. The first night in the basement, I lay on a thin mattress shoved against the wall, staring at the exposed pipes above me. Every drip from the old water heater echoed like a taunt. It smelled like damp concrete and dust, and the air was so cold it cut straight through my blanket. I wrapped myself tighter, but it didn't matter. I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd been exiled in my own house. I tried telling my parents the next morning. It's freezing down there. I can't even sleep. My mom didn't even glance up from her coffee. Wear more layers, she said flatly. Yeah, my dad added. It builds character. Meanwhile, upstairs, Daniel was posting pictures on Instagram from my old room. My bed, my desk, my posters on the wall. He was smiling, making captions like, "Finally have a place that feels like mine." And my parents commented under his posts with heart emojis, like proud parents cheering on their son. Not me, their actual son, but him. The more I complained, the more they brushed me off. "You're being dramatic. Stop whining. At least you have a roof over your head." They acted like I should be grateful they hadn't. Shoved me outside altogether. I started noticing every small detail that reminded me how little they cared. When Daniel had friends over, they'd tell me to stay downstairs so I wouldn't embarrass him. When dinner was served, he always got the biggest portion first. And if I dared to speak up, I'd get, "Don't start drama. Daniel's our guest," but he wasn't just a guest anymore. He was slowly becoming the center of the household, and I was just the leftover. Each night, as I lay listening to the scratching of bugs in the corner and the hum of the furnace, I realized this wasn't just about losing my room. It was about losing my place in the family entirely. And the worst part? I knew they weren't done pushing me down further. At first, I tried to convince myself Daniel didn't ask for any of this. Maybe he felt awkward too. But that thought didn't last long. Within a week, he started walking around like the house belonged to him. I came upstairs one afternoon and found him sprawled across my old bed, scrolling through his phone. He looked at me and smirked. "Basement treating you well?" He asked like it was a joke. I muttered, "It's fine." But inside, I was burning. Things only escalated. He invited his friends over constantly, giving them tours of his new room. They laughed when he called it the penthouse while making cracks about me living underground. One night, I overheard him telling someone, "Yeah, my aunt and uncle just wanted me to have a better setup. They said I deserved it more." When I confronted him later, he shrugged. "Hey, don't be mad at me. They made the choice. Maybe if you weren't so bitter all the time, they wouldn't treat you like that." That sentence hit harder than I wanted to admit, because deep down I wondered if he was right, if maybe I was the problem. But then I'd see my parents laughing at his jokes, piling his plate with seconds and telling everyone what a blessing it was to have him around. Meanwhile, they barely acknowledged me. It was clear. They weren't just choosing him over me in terms of space, they were choosing him in every way. And with each passing day, the basement didn't just feel like a place to sleep. It felt like a reminder that I'd been replaced. One night, after weeks of pretending I could handle the basement, a storm rolled through. At first, it was just heavy rain tapping against the small ground-level window. But then I felt it, the slow, cold creep of water seeping under the mattress. Within an hour, the floor was flooded. My blankets were soaked, my notebooks ruined, and the smell of mildew hit me like a punch. I ran upstairs, clutching my drenched clothes, shivering. "The basement's flooding! Everything's ruined!" I yelled, hoping for even a shred of concern. My dad barely looked up from the TV. "It's just water. Clean it up." I stared at him, waiting for him to be joking. "I can't even sleep down there tonight." "Then sleep on the couch," my mom said, not missing a beat as she scrolled through her phone. And from upstairs, Daniel shouted, laughing, "Hope you brought your snorkel." I wanted to scream. Instead, I just stood there, dripping, realizing they weren't going to help me. They didn't care. I could have drowned in that basement, and it would have been brushed off as overreacting. That night, I curled up on the couch, staring at the ceiling while the sound of Daniel's music thumped above me. Every note was like a reminder. He's upstairs in your room, while you're nothing but an afterthought on the sofa. For the first time in my life, I didn't just feel neglected, I felt erased. Like I wasn't even part of this family anymore, and that's when it hit me. If I stayed, this would never change. After the flood night, something inside me snapped, not in a loud, explosive way, but in a quiet, permanent shift. I stopped asking my parents for help. I stopped arguing with Daniel. I just shut down. At school, I threw myself into extra shifts at my part-time job. Stocking shelves late at night felt easier than walking into that house and hearing Daniel blasting music from my room. Every dollar I earned, I tucked away like it was a lifeline. I didn't tell anyone. Not my friends, not my parents, not even my coworkers. When my mom asked why I was gone so much, I lied. Just studying with friends. She didn't care enough to press further. Down in the basement, I started packing little by little. Old clothes, my favorite books, a box of photos I didn't want to leave behind. I slid them into bags and hid them behind the furnace. Every time I stashed something away, I felt lighter, like I was slowly peeling myself out of the life they forced me into. But the silence was the hardest part. Pretending I was fine while they paraded Daniel like some golden child. He'd say things like, "Man, it's crazy how your parents trust me with so much. Guess I just fit right in." I'd force a smile, but in my head, I was counting hours, not days. I knew I couldn't last much longer. And then, just when I thought I could endure until I saved enough, I overheard something that changed everything. One afternoon, I snuck upstairs to grab a charger I'd left on the hallway table. I froze at the top of the stairs when I heard my parents' voices coming from the kitchen, low and laugh-filled, like they were sharing a secret I wasn't supposed to hear. I thought about turning back, but something in me wanted to know what they were saying. "And we'll just keep him there until he finishes college," my dad said, the pride in his voice making bile rise in my throat. "He gets the big room, the nice bed, and all the extras. He's family, better for our image." My mom laughed. "You handled that so well." "Everyone thinks we did this out of kindness. They don't need to know we planned it." Planned it. The word hit me harder than the flood. It wasn't a temporary favor. It wasn't a momentary lapse. It was deliberate. They had decided together to move me out and give everything to Daniel while pretending to be saints. They even talked about how they'd spin the story at the next family gathering, how generous they were, how supportive. "Make sure you tell Aunt Farah about the mattress we bought him," my dad said, and I could hear the excitement like they were shopping for a prize. I stood there, frozen, listening to them brag about my displacement like it was a decoration they'd hung on their mantle. In that moment, every excuse I'd tried to give them evaporated. This wasn't neglect. This was choice, and the choice was cruel. I crept away with the charger in my hand, heart pounding so loud I was sure they'd hear it. I felt something shift from hurt to something colder, like an ember catching. If they were going to lie and pretend, then I could stop pretending too. But I didn't know how to fight them yet. I only knew one thing for sure. I wasn't going to stay and be thanked for my own erasure. After overhearing that conversation, I stopped waiting for them to change. I stopped hoping for even a scrap of fairness. Instead, I started planning my exit. Every paycheck from my job went straight into savings. I skipped lunches at school, stopped hanging out with friends, and walked instead of taking the bus to save a few extra dollars. Each coin, each crumpled bill felt like a step closer to freedom. At night, while Daniel sprawled across my old bed upstairs, I sat in the basement scrolling through listings for shared apartments. Most were tiny, crowded, and far from perfect, but they looked like paradise compared to the damp cement floor I was forced to call home. I kept my plan quiet. If my parents found out, they'd guilt me into staying or worse, spin it so I looked like the ungrateful villain again. So I learned to smile when they bragged about helping family and nod when they reminded me to be supportive. Bit by bit, I started moving essentials into a duffel bag, clothes, my worn-out notebook, the few photos I cared about. I tucked the bag behind the furnace where I knew no one would bother to look. Every time I zipped it closed, I felt a flicker of hope, but that hope came with nerves too. I kept asking myself, what if I fail? What if I can't make it out there? What if leaving makes me the villain they always said I was? Still, the thought of another night in that basement drowned those doubts out. Because deep down I knew I'd rather risk failing alone than keep surviving in a house where I didn't even exist. I just needed the right moment to slip. I'd waited for the weekend when the house was loudest. Daniel's friends always came over on Saturdays, the kind of chaos that made it easy for me to blend into the background. I packed the duffel bag at dawn, moving with a careful, practiced silence like a thief reclaiming what was mine. My hands shook, but I told myself it was just the cold. I shoved one last photo of my mom and me into the bag, the only soft thing I wanted to carry, and zipped it closed. Before I left, I went upstairs once more. The room looked the same, but it didn't feel like mine. There was a cheap air freshener in the corner, and a pair of shoes I didn't recognize by the bed. I stood in the doorway for a second, breathing in the stale scent of someone else's perfume, and for a sliver of a second I almost turned back. Then I placed the house key on the kitchen counter and wrote a note on the only piece of paper I could find. Since you chose him over me, I'm choosing me. I left the note right where they'd see it, the microwave, a place my mom checked every morning. I didn't say goodbye. I walked out the front door with one bag and a backpack and left the house the way you leave a bad dream. Slow, steady, impossible to believe was real. The sun felt strange on my face, too bright and honest. I felt guilty for a second, guilty for abandoning them, for making them look bad. But that passed like a cloud. As I walked to the bus stop, I kept replaying the look on my dad's face if he opened that note and understood I'd left for good. Would he be furious? Would he try to stop me? I didn't yet know what would happen when they found the note. I thought leaving would be the hard part, but the real storm came after. My phone blew up within hours. Missed calls. Angry texts from my mom. Where are you? Do you realize what you've done? My dad's message was shorter. Get back here now. But I didn't go back. Instead, I told my side of the story. I sent pictures of my room in the basement to relatives, mold creeping up the walls, the soaked mattress from the storm, the boxes I'd been forced to stack as furniture. I explained, simply and without sugarcoating, that they gave my room to Daniel and pushed me underground like I was less than family. The reactions were instant. My aunt texted me. I had no idea. They told everyone you wanted the basement for privacy. Others were furious on my behalf. My cousin messaged, "That's messed up." I'm sorry, man. Word spread faster than I expected. Soon my parents' proud story about helping Daniel in his time of need didn't look so heroic anymore. People started asking questions at family gatherings, poking holes in their version. I heard from a friend of the family that my mom broke down when someone asked, "Why would you do that to your own son?" Meanwhile, Daniel stayed quiet. He didn't defend me, but he didn't deny it either. His silence said enough. My parents doubled down, of course. They texted me, "You're embarrassing us. Family matters should stay private." But by then, the truth was already out. For the first time, the spotlight wasn't shining on their fake generosity. It was burning straight through their lies, and I realized something. Maybe I didn't have to yell at them. Maybe just letting everyone see the truth was the loudest revenge I could ever get. Moving into the apartment with two strangers wasn't glamorous. My room was barely big enough for a twin bed and a desk, and the walls were thin enough that I could hear the guy next door snoring. But every time I shut that door, I felt something I hadn't in years. Peace. Nobody barged in. Nobody mocked me. Nobody told me my comfort didn't matter. The first night, lying on my own mattress, I stared at the ceiling and felt this strange mixture of grief and relief. Grief for the family I thought I had, and relief that I didn't have to keep begging for a place in it. My parents still tried to call, but I stopped answering. When they finally left me a voicemail, my dad's voice was cold. "You've humiliated us. Don't bother coming back until you learn respect." I deleted it without replying. For once, I wasn't the one carrying shame. That belonged to them. Relatives whispered about their treatment of me, and they hated that people knew. But honestly, that wasn't my problem anymore. Daniel never reached out either. Maybe he felt guilty, maybe not. Either way, I didn't care. He could keep the room, the posters, the false crown my parents handed him. I'd rather sleep in a shoebox apartment where I mattered than in a home where I was disposable. Looking back, the basement wasn't the worst thing. The worst thing was realizing how little they valued me. But it was also the push I needed to walk away. And in leaving, I gave myself the one thing they never would: respect. I may not have a perfect family anymore, but I finally have myself. And that's more than enough.